Farm Bureau. Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball, D1Baseball.com. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. If you have not subscribed to their website, you do not love college baseball. Or maybe you don't need to spend the money for whatever reason. I understand that. I'm not judging. Just telling you that the content is worth every single penny that you put into that. Kendall, we almost had 5 sweeps in the opening weekend of conference play, which is a little insane to think about.
No, it really is. I mean, I think if you look at opening weekend, I think if you would have told me that Missouri would sweep Tennessee, South Carolina would sweep Georgia, Mississippi State would get swept, and Ole Miss would get swept, I think I'd be the most surprised person in the room. So I think it's going to be one of those years where, I mean, that league is so deep that, if you don't play at a high level of baseball in a given weekend, you could very easily get swept. I just don't think there is a bad team in that league right now.
So I did the Georgia-South Carolina game on TV, and Lance Cormier and I were debating which performance on the mound was better. Was it Hunter Owen for Vanderbilt in his complete game shutout of Ole Miss, or Brandon Sproat for Florida in his complete game shutout of Alabama? SEC named them co-pitchers of the week.
I would go with probably Hunter Owen. I just think given just how potent Ole Miss's lineup is, to be able to shut them down like that is ultra impressive. I would throw a man by the name of Paul Skeens that makes too for what he did against A&M. Honestly, I think he probably was in the mix for the Player of the Week award because he already won it like 2 or 3 times. But, I mean, that was as good a performance as I've seen on the mound against a good team in a really long time. It's kind of interesting. Jim Schlossnagle made the comment the other day, after that game, that was the best he's seen since Steven Strasburg at San Diego State. And I'm not so sure I wouldn't argue with him. I mean, it was as good as it can possibly get at the collegiate level.
We talked about that on Monday, and I mentioned you got 2 complete games, and these are your co-SEC pitchers of the week, but I'm not so sure that the more impressive performance wasn't Skeens. I mean, he sat 97-98 for the entire length of his performance. The breaking ball is, it's a plus, if not a plus pitch, then he throws in different locations. Yeah. He's throwing a 91-mile-an-hour changeup. That's ridiculous.
Well, I will give him a little bit more credit because I was there, and actually on my gun, it was 98 to 100 throughout. So he did not throw a pitch under 98 on my radar gun, at least for the first 4 innings. So, yeah, the thing about Paul is that's really made him such a more impressive pitcher than he was last year at Air Force is, when you look back at last year, you look back at some of his old footage, he had a big arm. Like he was up to, 98, 99 last year with his fastball. But, the slider wasn't as sharp, the changeup wasn't as sharp, and the big differentiator for him right now is that slider, as you just mentioned, is a wipeout pitch. It is a pitch that, I kind of go back to last weekend against A&M and against All-American Austin Bose. He goes 100, 99, 85 slider at the exact same spot. And I'll just say this, if you command that, that's almost unhittable. Like, you pretty much just have to guess right to be able to get a hit. And the other thing I really like about him real quick is, he's one of those guys that, if somebody even makes contact off of him, he kind of takes it personal. So he's just in his zone right now.
Yeah, and pitches with a lot of emotion. So
no doubt.
We've seen a ton of elite pitchers come through the SEC. But normally it's one per team, right? It's like most everybody's got an ace. Most everybody's got a stud. And I feel like we're in a spot where we are seeing multiple first-rounders on, half a dozen teams in the SEC. Is that crazy?
It is crazy. It's kind of funny. I'll kind of invoke Ole Miss here. Really, if you think about it, there's a time frame there where, if you think back to the rotation that Ole Miss had with, Mark Holloman, Eric Fowler, and those guys, Stephen Head, that was one of the few rotations in college baseball that you can look at and go, hey, they've got 3 top 3 round type of guys in the rotation. Now it's like you look across the whole league, as you mentioned, you look at, LSU with, Ty Floyd and Thatcher Hurd are very much, top 2 or 3 rounders. You look at South Carolina with guys like Noah Hall and Will Sanders, Vanderbilt, with Hunter Owen and those guys. And the list kind of goes on. It is crazy just how much talent is in this league. And frankly, it's why, predicting this
let
league
me interrupt
is difficult.
you. Let me interrupt you. You heard it here first. Kendall Rogers has written off the Tennessee Volunteers.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I just hadn't mentioned them.
You didn't mention them. You didn't mention Tennessee and that group of great starting pitching staffs, Kendall.
Well, they belong in the mix. I was going to get to them.
Vol Twitter is coming for you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, it's really interesting. Like, Chase Dolander, as good as he is, like, he's been human this year. Chase Burns, I actually watched his outing against Missouri the other day. He looked pretty good, and then, Drew Beam's pretty good. So, yeah, they've got a great rotation, too. I'm trying to think of a team right now with, like, a really bad rotation. I get the, like, Ole Miss has had its up and downs, but, heck, I still believe in that rotation, too. Maybe Mississippi State is, like, the one team in this league who doesn't really have a elite winter rotation.
I'm not trying to be inflammatory when I say this. When I make this statement, I'm going to give you a true or false statement and then let you take it from there. And I am, look, I'm the last guy, I promise you, that is trying to take anything away from what Mississippi State accomplished 2 years ago and what Ole Miss accomplished last year. True or false, it is now harder to win a regular season SEC championship than it is to win a national championship. True or false?
I think that's false. I just think
regular season
in order. Well, my thing is, I think in order to win the national championship, you have to have so many things go your way. You think about all the bounces and things like that Ole Miss got on its way to a national championship last year. Like, literally everything had to go right for them.
Yeah.
And I just think of the SEC. If you can get on a roll, like, you can win the regular season title. But it's a legitimate question. But I know if I say, number one, I think it's tougher to win the national championship. But number two, even if I thought the other, I'm not sure I'd say it because it's going to end up on Twitter somewhere.
You might be onto something to this there. Hey, let's talk quickly about this weekend. Sure. Vanderbilt in Starkville to take on Mississippi State. Bulldogs fully with their back against the wall. Vanderbilt was maybe as impressive as they have been offensively the entire season last weekend. And, oh, by the way, they're pretty good on the mound. What's happening in Starkville?
Well, I think Mississippi State gets Vandy at the right time. Because I think if you look at Vanderbilt, this is a team that's probably riding really high after the Ole Miss series. They probably think they're a little bit better than maybe they are. But, I think when you look at Vanderbilt overall, this is a club that when I saw them opening weekend, it was really a mixed bag. Like, one of the games, they didn't look very good. The rest of the weekend, they looked pretty good. R.J. Austin's an exciting player. On the mound, Hunter Owen obviously is coming into his own a little bit. They've got depth on the mound. But I think this weekend is a lot more about Mississippi State than it is Vanderbilt. I just think when you look at State, after getting swept by Kentucky and, frankly, looking really bad in the process, they've got to find a way to right the ship because the problem with this league is, it's not like the ACC to where, like, remember a couple of years ago when Virginia and NC State both started it was something like 2-12 or 2-11, and both teams finished the year, with 40-plus wins. If you get in a big hole in this league, you are in massive trouble. And I just think when you look at Mississippi State, I'm not necessarily saying is a must-win series, but they can't afford to go 0-3. They've got to show some sort of improvement. But they're the hardest team in college baseball to figure out. I was watching the game against Kentucky, the one they got run ruled. And, honestly, I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was really, really bad baseball. And so, I don't know what the answer is for them, but it's got to improve. And I don't really blame the fans for being pretty mad at this point.
Florida and Ole Miss in Oxford, and this feels like a really, really big weekend for the Rebels.
Yeah, that's a really big weekend for Ole Miss. Again, you're 0-3 in the league. You're back home. I do love the fact they're at home this week. I think Florida, if you look at Florida's schedule, it's extremely home-based, as you might imagine, the Sunshine State. But, they go on the road for the first time. And, again, I have no doubt that the Ole Miss is going to score runs. I think after last weekend, I think that's an aberration. I think they just kind of caught Vanderbilt on a weird weekend. Their offense didn't do much. I think their offense will be fine. I think the big question mark for me is, A, is Wyatt Langford back for Florida after a little situation a couple weeks ago? And B, can they keep guys like Josh Rivera down? He's one of the big breakout players this year in college baseball. Ole Miss's rotation is going to have to give them solid starts. I think I actually like Ole Miss in this series at home, though. I think they're going to play really well.
All right. It's a big weekend coming up across the SEC. Kendall, always appreciate your time. Good catching up on this Wednesday, and we'll talk to you next week.
You got it, buddy. Be good.
Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball, D1Baseball.com. Joining us on